everyone, and welcome to our Environment, Climate Change, and Environmental Justice Committee. I believe we have a quorum, Mr. Clerk.
Yes, we do.
Okay, do you have any cards?
As a matter of fact, we do.
Because I'd like to take that up first. Here, let's go ahead and take a public comment and general public comment at once. Donner Lapa, are you here? Can you come forward, sir? Join us at the table. Do we have any? Is there enough chairs there?
Do we have chairs? Where are the chairs? Sorry?
I'm going to call a couple of names.
Yeah, they're here.
Jairo Angulo. Mr. Lapa, you're speaking on item 1. Mr. Angulo, you're speaking on item 1. Natalie Schletz, are you here? Item 1. Gerald Lee, item 1 as well. Are there chairs for you there? There it is, because I can't see from where I'm sitting. Okay, why don't we go ahead and start with our first speaker.
I am too. Your name, please?
Mr. Lapa, are you ready? Are you ready? We can start with you.
Yeah.
You have 1 minute and you're speaking on item 1. Go ahead.
I want to talk about the increase that I received. I was paying $118 a month, and it's being increased.
Hold on for just a second. We're going to move the microphone a little closer to you. Go ahead.
I was paying $118 a month, and it's been increased to $352 a month. It's a 298% increase. Represents $4,200 annually, which is like 2 months vacancy in one apartment. I'm being charged $43 for a locked gate, and that's $10 per visit based on 4.3 calls a month. And I'm being charged $108 for a 100-foot pull-out. That's $25 per visit based on 4.3 times a month. The schedule of extra services that was included in the booklet has no provision for locked gates, and it has no.
Thank you, sir. Your minute is up. We only get a minute. But thank you. Our next speaker, Mr. Angulo.
I also am against this new proposal for a number of reasons. Our increase, our rate went up from $203 to $374 a month, which is $171 or about an 88% increase in rates. The trash hauler that has been assigned to our area is incompetent. They've missed pickups. They have left our garage gate open. We live in a security building. It is a concern. We have a high incidence of homelessness in the area. We don't have a choice of vendors, which is absolutely ridiculous. Our service is going to be reduced by 50% in order for us to keep our old price. Our trash can has remained on the street for 45 minutes. It's just the service provided by this vendor is just absolutely abhorrent. We would like our previous trash hauler back.
Okay, thank you very much. The next speaker is Natalie Schletz. Is that how you pronounce her last name?
Correct. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm here representing a small business in District 5. Our trash has increased 3 times. We were paying $60 a month. It's now $227 a month. What happened to free enterprise and freedom of choice? This is a monopoly. And now with one trash company offering the service, the quality of service has decreased. We have things that don't necessarily fit into the recycle bins, but if we were to increase the bins, the price would go up even more. We were very happy with our trash company before. Wish we could continue to work with them. And obviously, the 3-time increase is bad for our business, and it's almost impossible for small businesses to remain in Los Angeles with such high taxes and increases like this.
Okay, thank you very much. The next speaker is Gerald Lee.
Hi, I am a constituent of Mitchell Farrell. The waste hauler program does not work because I spoke to Dan Myers from LA Sanitation that former contractual arrangements are not being honored, as I am with Republic Services at $90, and the new arrangement with UWS is at $216.72. the exact price quoted from LA Sanitation. This is a significant cost difference that makes no economic sense. If the city of LA wants to do this, there should be a subsidy for the difference which was proposed to Dan Myers, or honor old contracts with current haulers, as former contractual agreements are subject to legal debates and legal challenges versus the city of Los Angeles due to being forced out of old contracts with current waste haulers. I am outraged that UWS has sent me a bill this month but has not serviced my location and claimed that they are falsely serving me when I am clearly being serviced by Republic Services. The UWS apologized and discarded the bill. The Department of Sanitation has provided no guidance or solutions but to notify the City Council.
Thank you, sir. You can sit down. Thank you. The next speaker is Chris Hutchinson, followed by Armando Herman, who has filled out a cards for items 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 5, and general public comment. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Great.
Sir.
Chris Hutchison, thanks for taking the time. We own multiple properties in multiple districts across the city of LA. Current fees that we pay for garbage right now are about $1,950 a month, going to over $4,000 a month. So that's $25,000 a year, going to over $50,000 a year. These vendors were imposed or forced on us. Was not a free market move. It's non-competitive, tantamount to a monopoly, and taxation without representation. A lot of the properties that we own are rent-controlled, LIHTC properties, and HAP contract properties providing affordable housing to the city of LA. There's no method or mechanism to recoup or defray any of these costs, so it's making the affordable housing that much more difficult to supply. To add injury to insult to injury, got a letter from a vendor here saying that our garbage containers were overfilled and overflowing. As a courtesy, they'd pick up the charge for this one incident. They took the time to send me pictures of the trash that's piling up in property. They never showed up. They don't show up. That's why the trash is there. Now they're going to bill me extra.
Thank you very much for coming. Mr. Herman, you have 3 minutes. You filled out cards for all items, including public comment. Go ahead.
No, as you say, the increases of taxation with no representation by the mayor for the Bureau of Sanitation to present the updates. You heard the former speakers. Yes, they're black and they're all in an uproar. They do not like the increases as much as I do not agree with the increases. So on behalf of all of them, because they're afraid of their constitutional right,
fuck you. Nobody wants increases and nobody wants taxation in their properties. It's hard enough to live in Los Angeles. Why do you continue to create this hardship? Forgive and forget. Forget and forgive. Don't vote for the mayor, but vote for your trash. Item 2.
Ms. Martinez and Dawson, relative to instructing the BOS to report regard, fuck them too. Let's go to the next item. I only have 3 minutes. Now, Mr. Bloomfield and the double dwarf Englander who is in the back over there standing, looking over my shoulder, regarding the next steps for the Recycle LA program. Well, you stupid schmuck, why don't you first pick up the fucking trash before you start recycling, and then you can create more jobs. Number 4, Bloomfield and Price, the Jew boys not in this committee, but relative to instructing regard to alternative smart city methods, the option of waste collection. Well, you heard the first item. Everybody's pissed off. They don't want their taxes raised because you just can't pick up the goddamn trash, because you should hire goats to go out there and eat all the trash, and then you can eliminate all the goddamn problems.
All right, now I'm going to general public comment. It's a real goddamn shame when you have people that are elected officials who cannot regulate the process of programs, service, and activities in your communities. It's time that you hear the uproar of your constituents, and all those who are your constituents are very upset with the tax raises and the overcharges by all these services. You know, we have the department of Miss Penny back here behind me from Mr. I forgot his name, but yeah, Kevin James' department. And then, once again, why don't you have a solution? Because your jackass mayor is out there in a skirt parading to become your next president. Well, there's one thing about having a steer for a queer. He doesn't steer us in the right direction. So as long as our mayor has his head up his ass, or so to speak, Glenn Dake's head up his ass, do something and get the job done. We're fucking tired of this bullshit.
Thank you so much, Mr. Herman. Do we have any other public comments? Anyone else filled out any
That's it.
cards?
That's all,
Okay,
ma'am.
then that's it. Then I will go ahead and close public comment on all the items, including general public comment. Let's go through the agenda, members. I'd like to continue items 2 for 90 days. Is there any objection to that?
No objection.
Seeing none, that will be the order. I'd like for us to approve items 5 and 6 on consent. Any objection? Seeing none, thank you. And item 4, I just would like to offer, Mr. Cedillo, would you like to say a few words on item 4? Because I want to offer a quick amendment, but I understand you want to say something on item 4.
What is 4?
Huh?
What item is 4? Right. Should we wait till after the presentation?
Do you want to see a presentation on 4? We weren't prepared to do that, but is the department here to speak on item number 4?
They are here. The department is present.
You're not, Mr. Cedillo, I understood that you wanted to say a few words on the Glassell Park Neighborhood Council because they submitted a community impact statement. That was my understanding.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, I just want to acknowledge the Glassell Park Neighborhood Council for submitting their support of this motion going forward. They're in full support of optimizing the city's waste collection efforts through the use of new technologies. We all support that. I want to request that BOS report consider questions that were submitted by the Glassell Park Neighborhood Council, including, and there's a series that were offered, but reports like, or questions like, what are the cost savings of implementing these new smart city technologies? So some assessment of that. How will these technologies improve current collection methods? And then as well as other questions that were contained in their responses. So just simply asking for that. And I thank the real attentiveness of the Glassell Park Neighborhood Council in terms of evaluating the report and participating and then coming back with suggestions.
Okay, thank you very much. My only amendment that I had on item number 4 was to instruct sanitation to include in the report a review of existing pilot efforts, their efficiencies compared to other sanitation initiatives, and their impacts on our safe streets cleanliness indexing. So if we can do that and include that in the report, I'd appreciate that. Okay. Are there any objections to that? No? Okay, seeing none. That will be the order. Let's go ahead and take up item 1 and 3 together. Mr. Clerk, can you read those items into the record?
Item number 1 relates to Bureau of Sanitation, present an update on the Recycle LA franchise system program. And number 3 relates to motion Blumenfield, Englander, Bonin et al. Relative to instructing the Bureau of Sanitation report on the Recycle LA program and allowing business customers to share bins in order to maximize use and related matters.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, if we can, before the department comes, we do have a member of the City Council that would like to say a few words, but before we bring him up, colleagues, the implementation of our franchise system has raised so many concerns among some of our apartment owners as well as businesses in our district. So I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to hear from the department on what some of those concerns are, for the department to update us on the franchise system and how the transition is going, and really focus our efforts on what some of these concerns are and how to fix them, how to better communicate with our businesses and our haulers, as well as making sure we understate that rate system and how that impacts businesses. So I wanted to ask Mr. Englander if he wanted to come forward. Thank you, sir, for being patient. and for being here this afternoon. I know you want to share some of your frustrations with the committee, and hopefully we can begin to address those.
Well,
Good
thank you,
afternoon.
Madam Chair and colleagues. Thanks for taking this item up. Without going through the long laundry list, and you've heard a few, we're all getting the same phone calls each and every day. Our office is overloaded. In fact, I don't remember a time where we've gotten so many irate phone calls over one particular issue that's directly impacting so many different people. And we're ironing through it, and certainly there are a lot of wrinkles in the system, and I think every provider and hauler is doing it a little differently. We've all heard the stories of $600 a month to $2,300 for an apartment owner, a 54-unit building. My district, these are examples. My landlord, in fact, where my district office is, was estimated to go from $3,400 a month they were paying, there's many different buildings in the complex, to $12,500 a month. Fortunately, Waste Management was able to work with them and bring it down, but this is what we're seeing across the board, citywide. There's a small health salon that was $160 a month pickup and they were small brick and mortar mom and pa in my district. They're now getting hit with a $400 bill. So these are the calls we're getting, as many others. And one of the ideas that came out of this, as you may recall, some of you, I had a package of a series of different motions that, while this was coming through, nearly a dozen of them, to look at either carve-out exemptions or working with some of our partners, our nonprofit organizations, the Port of LA, as well as the airports, as well as low-income housing reductions for those types of qualified income units for residential customers, those particularly on Lifeline, looking at educational institutions and small daycare centers. And the list goes on. And unfortunately, none of those really saw the light of day, but we're here today. And so what opportunities do we have? In looking at that, what do we have precedent for and what makes sense? And so we already have a system for multifamily programs at our curbside where they share the bin. And we're in a shared economy, and we're certainly looking at that in a lot of other aspects and how to set rules and regulations and make it work for everyone. This is one that makes sense. It's practical. The idea that you would have a small hair salon, as an example, next door to a nail salon, that doesn't fill up an entire bin. In fact, many of them didn't even have their own bin before we implemented this, and they don't have the infrastructure to put a bin in. They don't have the space requirements. They might not have or have to lose parking behind their building, and often many of these in strip malls and other places only have one or two spaces for their workers to begin with. And so it really, beyond just the dollar amount, is a burden on a lot of these small businesses, and we're in an effort to try to make the city more business friendly. The idea of a shared bin is not that difficult to implement. In fact, I was talking to some of the haulers, and they were sharing ideas with me that I hadn't even thought of. For example, one of the issues they ran into, and they said, if we implement something like this, we think we can do it. But one of the issues would be, what if we were billing two different customers to share one bin and one stopped paying or one went vacant? Well, the idea that they shared with me is they can right-size the bin. Certainly they can change it out for a smaller bin if one stops paying. And they also have locking bin mechanisms. I mean, there's ways and solutions to do it. It's not brain surgery. It's not that difficult. But it would be a substantial reduction in certain types of industries or businesses, particularly the smaller businesses that are most impacted with this and the easiest to implement on that side. So I ask you to support this and move it forward for the department to come up with a plan is really the next step on how this will work, and the idea that we can come up with at least some savings to some of these businesses. In terms of all the other issues, I'll let you know one of the things we did early on when we saw this coming, and we knew it was going to come, in terms of the issues, the problems, the overwhelming number of phone calls. The first thing that I did is I got on the phone with Enrique and said, this is going to be coming in the next few months. What I'd like to do is get our hauler, who is going to be representing our portion of CD12, to have staff on site in my office on a regular basis. When somebody calls and complains, they can actually schedule an appointment in my office to come sit down with Waste Management, and that their staff is co-located in my office, as we have with DWP when we had the billing problems and others. And they agreed. And so they actually have been in our office meeting with customers to work out their many problems. And so you can call my office. I know a couple of the other offices are doing it. I would hope that all the haulers stepped up to do that across the board with all of our offices. One of the other major issues we've seen are the sheer volume of phone calls. From what I've heard, and I haven't actually seen any data on this, and I'll close with this, is that the ones that are calling 311 aren't getting transferred to the correct hauler. And so I think there's a communication issue that perhaps should be looked at and discussed there. And so I haven't seen the volume or the number of calls. That data hasn't been shared, but I know you're going to get to that. So I ask you to support the shared bin concept and see where we can take it to the next level. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Englander. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Is the department ready to come forward? So members, I thought it'd be important for us to get an update from Sanitation on the transition of this new system, in an effort to understand what's going wrong and what we need to do to focus efforts to fix some of these issues. I know there's clearly a lot of frustration based on what we heard here this afternoon, based on the calls that we're getting in our offices with some of the businesses. Mr. Herman, if you can't sit there still and not be interruptive, I'm going to ask you to leave. I'm just warning you, if you're going to act up and you can't sit still, you can go do that somewhere else. Okay, thank you very much for being here. Goodbye. That's great. Can you help Mr. Herman out, please?
Madam Chair, we should
Thank you. We
really
should
note that
Mr. Herman continues to be disruptive.
Full of people, including our general manager, waiting for Mr. Herman as he continues to disrupt the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. Let's go ahead and hear from the department members, and then we'll ask questions after they conclude their presentation.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting us and for asking us to provide a very timely update on how the implementation is going. We've come to look at this initiative sort of in three major categories, three major phases. There was the policy development phase some years back, perhaps 5-6 years ago. Then there was the contract award phase, which also inherently had a number of deliberations, as did the policy. And with your leadership and the mayor's leadership, we've been able to move forward in the best interest of the city. We have entered now the implementation phase, which, as all of you acknowledged, certainly in your comments, Madam Chair, just the sheer scale of this transition. That alone, we knew, was a big undertaking, and it's something that no one ever underestimated. As we have entered the implementation, one, the reality of what we all had predicted, that it is a huge transition, it is a huge change in the way in which this service has been provided. But very good things have come out. One is it's having solidified the partnership that you had asked us to form with our 7 service providers. That has been the case. We truly have formed this partnership, definitely through the implementation phase. We're a month and a half into the implementation. Yes, there are field logistics that have come to surface in which how we are rolling this out, how we can tweak it, how we can improve it, and how we can continue to move forward. There was the question about how readily are we engaging with the general public and definitely the customers at large. We've done a number of outreach. Can we do more on that? And I think with our exchange today, likely clearly we will come out convinced that we can and should do more on engagement and on education and outreach. You will hear definitely from us on the sort of the systematic update on how things are going, some of the things that have surfaced. And then if it's your inclination, Madam Chair, the 7 contractor partners are also here willing and ready to provide you with their own take of how things are going in the field with an eye toward making positive progress. The concerns that were raised by the customers, it's important, obviously, that we are able to engage with the customer through the franchisee contractors and us in the city to be able to articulate the policy drivers that are behind this initiative. We're moving more and more toward a landfill-free city, landfill-free society. That brings with it significant changes and significant important changes in behavior. Sometimes they do come with additional cost. You know that we have moved into clean fuel vehicles. Clean fuel trucks do cost more than diesel trucks. We've known that, and we know that. But that's a change that we as a policy, you, the city, us as the department, know that it's worth making the investment. Because we've done it in other areas. We know that it is worth every dollar. Are there other costs? We are going to be improving the facilities and the conditions in which the employees that are associated in this industry are going to be improved. Do those inherently come at a cost? In some cases, they do. But you also charge this during the negotiations phase and during the contractual award phase, that we do everything possible to leverage the city in negotiating the best rates possible. And we did that. We did do that. Proof of it is that during the negotiations, there were for sure one hauler that dropped out just because they knew that they couldn't afford to charge the rates that we had negotiated. So we want to assure in every way possible the customers that not only we have the right policy drivers in all of this, but we maintain the interest of their cost as a forefront issue. Will we always guarantee a super low price as in the past? You know, so much of this industry in some ways has been brought out of the shadows. I mean, we know that some of that has been brought out of the shadows. And you know how some of the operators have been working for years. I mean, you'll see that we started out with a number of accounts, 65,000 accounts, that's the best estimate. Right now, our next best adjusted estimate is that we may be up to 80,000 accounts. That means that we didn't even know that there were 15,000 other accounts that existed. And yet, service was being provided in some way. So, you know, on the one hand, we're daylighting all this stuff that was important that we daylight. So let's provide an update on how things are going in the field.
Certainly.
Dan Myers.
Dan Myers, LA Sanitation. Good afternoon, council members. I'd like to go over a quick overview of really what has transpired to date. I want to talk about some of the pre-transition, some of the activities that actually happened before July 1st, the customer transition that we're actually in the middle of now, some of the service-related issues that have come up because of both of those. I want to also touch on rates, its development, and how customers can work through it with us. And to provide a brief update on our subcontracting efforts that our service providers have provided to date. Not going to dwell too much on this. Obviously, the program and how it was designed and how it has been implemented truly supports the city's adopted goals through this program that include the reduction of 1 million tons of waste to landfills, clean fuel vehicle that Enrique had spoke of, and what will be seen as superior customer service as we move through this program. So, talked a little bit about pre-transition. So we all know that beginning in July that we have had our service providers out on the streets working with customers, transitioning them into the program. But there was a lot of work done behind the scenes to get us to the point of being able to actually start transition in July. It began with the development of our IT systems, and I'll get into a little bit later of how that works, but developing a system so that that we, the city, LA San, is the first point of contact for all customer calls. That system has been upgraded to be able to intake all inquiries from commercial franchise customers. That system has been integrated with the service provider system. So when a customer calls into LA San's call center, that information is immediately relayed to the service provider's system. As those service requests are updated, those updates are immediately fed back to our system. So it's a very quick and seamless flow of information from anybody who contacts LA San in its call centers to the hauler, service provider, and back to us. For the most part, every service provider, as soon as the contracts were signed, began ordering trucks, ordering bins. Those trucks have started to be delivered and are being delivered still as we speak. Hundreds of trucks being brought into this system, as well as hiring staff. Staff was needed not only for the deployment out in the field of the bins, but also performing the waste assessments. There's over 400 staff out in the field every day or behind the scenes supporting those field staff, performing waste assessments, helping customers transition into the system, as well as our detailed transition plan. And I'll talk about that a little bit more also, of exactly how we've put together the sequence of bringing customers into the system. But also what's extremely important to point out is the work that was done between the franchise service providers to swap accounts, and I'll get into some details of what that looks like, prior to July 1st, as well as working with the non-contracted service providers to acquire their accounts. As I mentioned, LA San is the first point of contact. LA San's customer care center is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We began receiving calls in April of this year, continue to intake calls every single day. Average wait time, although it is dependent on the call volume, typically stays under 2 minutes. What's also important with this, and one of the key reasons why LA San took on the responsibility of being the first point of contact, is our ability to monitor every service request that comes in. And staff is doing that every single day. We receive reports 4 times a day on the service requests that come in. Staff monitors not only the type of service requests that are coming in, but also how those service requests are being fulfilled. And that monitoring happens every day, and it's because of our integrated call system that we're able to do that. So we partnered with seven service providers who were already providing service in much of the city, but not necessarily providing service to those in their zones. We know that that one of the big lifts through this program is actually getting the service provider to understand their customer's need, establish billing. So beginning in April, our service providers began working with each other to swap accounts. And that was typically, it's often a one-for-one. Waste management that would have accounts in the West Valley, Athens that have accounts in the West Valley would swap with Waste Management who had accounts in West LA. And this allowed them to really begin to service their customers. what they also did is they also began working with the non-franchised service providers. We've been in communication with the non-franchise service providers, letting them know that the program's coming, when the program is to come into effect. What we didn't want to see is that all at one time, those service providers, a mass exodus out of the city. To date, our service providers have been able to work with 15 of the non-franchise service providers and have been able to acquire over 5,000 accounts. This swap all happened prior to July 1st. In total, there's been about 30,000 accounts prior to July 1st that actually moved from one service provider to another. But with that came a lot of its own challenges. There was confusion with that. At times, there were different arrangements that were made. For example, a non-franchise service provider could continue to provide the billing, and our service provider would provide the collection. That was the way of providing, payment to the non-franchise service providers. And many of these different deals came into play. All functioned a little bit differently, and unfortunately to the customer did cause confusion. And I'll talk a little bit about the service disruptions that happened along with those also. The good news is that as of now, we have our service providers providing service to nearly 48,000 of their customers in their appropriate zones. So that gets us to July 1st. July 1st has been noted as our start of transition. That actually began a month earlier in June. So let me talk about a little bit how we did this. We know that 80, 65, even 80,000 accounts could not be transitioned at one time. So we work with our service provider, prepared a detailed plan to break the city up further into smaller geographical areas. And those geographical areas represented a month at which they would be transitioned. So we established 6 different what we called subzones. And each of those subzones represented a month at which that account would be transitioned into the system. It began in June with Subzone 1. LA San mailed notification letters to every customer in Subzone 1. We actually mailed notices to not only the physical address, but also the billing agent to truly try to maximize the exposure and touch to the customer. And we noticed them that beginning in July, they would receive a waste assessment. And during that waste assessment, the service provider sits down, works with the customer, goes over the program, what it entails, the customer's rights, responsibilities, and attempts to, at that time, to also right-size the account with the new services that are being provided as part of the Recicla program. And with the anticipation that in August, all the customers they were able to reach a service agreement with would begin service. For the customers that they weren't able to establish an actual service agreement with, they would continue to work with those customers, but would send them, our service providers would send them an additional notice, letting them know that they would be brought onto the system at their current service level and the associated Recicla rate. Unfortunately, at that time, it's typically an account is not right-sized because that agreement was not able to be made with the customer. And then a customer would then be brought onto the program in Subzone 1 by September 1st and provided service through this auto-enrollment system. And that continues every month. So in Subzone 2, we send the letters out in July, waste assessments August, September, start service for everybody who signs agreement. October, we would then enroll those who were not able to sign a service agreement with the city. So that's how we're marching through the transition and bringing the Recycler program to every customer. So I'm going to shift gears here a bit and do move to rates. When I talked about right-sizing an account, the purpose an account is right-sized is because the services offered under the Recycler program truly do not mirror the services that are offered to most customers currently. Some of the services that are provided are the customer's ability to meet state mandates. AB 341 is a mandatory commercial and multifamily state mandate. SB 1826 is a mandate for organics recycling at commercial premises. We have new regulations coming in with SB 1383, which again raises the bar for organics recycling. Customers now have the ability to comply with the state requirements under our program. Blue bin recycling is now a core feature of the Recycler program. The services offered to every customer and included in their rates. Talked about the 24-hour customer service. Also includes food rescue. All of our service providers have partnered with food rescue organizations. And they establish that partnership with businesses that have the ability to rescue food before it ever is considered food waste. It is our goal that food is used for what it is intended to do, which is feed people. Also included is bin cleaning, scout service less than 100 feet, and I could talk more about that. But also at core is truly a difference in what most customers are used to their interaction with their waste haulers. Typically, customers sign contracts. Those contracts you're pretty much locked into a service level. You can often increase it, rarely decrease it. It's important to know that through this program is at any point in time, a customer can work with their service provider and right-size their account, adjust their account to meet their needs. There is no limits. Signing a service agreement today does not limit them from calling up their service provider tomorrow and working with them to right-size their accounts to meet their needs. So, do want to talk a little bit about how rates work and how they function. I didn't include it in here, but there's a rate matrix that you look at, and it's the size of your bin and how often it's picked up. And what is typically done is a customer would say, okay, I currently have a bin it's a 3 cubic yard bin, and it's picked up twice a week. They go to that rate matrix, pull out that same service, and go, well, this is the rate I'm going to pay. Well, that is truly not our intent through this program. That customer's level of solid waste service remain the same. Our goal of reaching our 1 million tons disposal reduction is we're going to get there through recycling. And through this recycling, we expect to see customers' solid waste needs decrease and their recycling needs increase. As that happens, and the way the rate structure is developed, a customer's rate will decrease. This is an example. If a customer has a 2 3 cubic yard black bins for solid waste, serviced twice per week, their rate, if they just went to the rate table, would be $657. However, it's important to understand that now with that rate, it's not just 2 3 cubic yards black bins that are supplied. It is also at minimum it is 2 recycling bins also provided. The customer can actually increase their size of bins with no additional cost. So it's now twice as much service than what actually appears when you look at the rate table. The example of how a bill could potentially be reduced is they can just convert one of the black bins to a recycling bin. Still have two bins on site, one black, one blue, and their rate would go from $657 to $406. They could also continue to tweak it a bit. They could keep the 2-3 cubic yard black bins, add blue bin service, but decrease how often it's picked up. And if they decrease down to once a week service, the rate would go down to $350. This is an important example of truly how the system was designed and will continue to work. We know that there's a lot of questions on right sizing and how a customer's service is really going to fit, but this is how a right sizing of account should function through the Recycler program. So, do want to talk a bit also on the service-related issues. A lot of the issues that we've seen today, when I talk about service-related issues, I won't sugarcoat it, it's miscollections or in some cases abandoned accounts. And I want to talk a little bit why that happens and why it has happened. There was a significant problem that happened early in the system. We saw it happen in late April and May, where we had one service provider who was providing service, but was losing some of their drivers. There was a non-franchised hauler, was losing some of their drivers to some of our franchise haulers, which is great news that staff out there working, employees out there working, continue to have a job in the Recycler program. Although what it did do is it did stress the resources of that service provider. That stress caused a lot of miscollections. Good news is we had one of our actual service providers step in and actually purchase that company. No good deed goes unpunished. That actually further stretched their resources. But it's part of the movement, of resources, the movement of companies from one company to another. Also, there is this, I describe it as this symphony that has to be conducted when with waste collection. Some areas of the city, that symphony, there's a lot of notes to play. Every time an account is brought on board, every account is unique and provides a unique set of circumstances for their collection needs. If it requires underground collection, gate codes, that symphony of running a scout truck ahead of a vehicle, collecting that bin, bringing it out, having the truck there at the right time to collect it, bringing a truck back around. It's a symphony that really needs to be practiced before it's truly perfected. And our service providers are out there working right now to perfect this collection activity. But also at the same time, what's also happening is accounts are being rerouted. Rerouted for all the right reasons. We looked at, for example, in South LA. In South LA, Republic Services rerouted 32 routes. And that's great because what that did is that actually gave us the routing efficiencies that we expect to achieve through this program. And it truly, through these routing efficiencies, it minimizes the time the truck's on the road, the distance the truck has to follow. But with those reroutes is a complete new learning curve for all those customers. But the good news is that LA San, from April 1st, has been able to take those service calls. We've worked with our service providers And typically, if it's a miscollection or an abandoned account, our service providers are able to provide those services within 24 hours. Lastly, I'll touch on our subcontracting and the outreach efforts that were done. LA San and our 7 service providers were challenged by the City Council to, as we continue through this program, is to increase subcontracting opportunities. LA San and our service providers took that call. In January, we held 9 separate meet and greets. During those meet and greets, they were held at different zones throughout the city. Our service providers were there, and they actually had the opportunity to interact with potential subcontractors. And in support of that, we sent out 283 emails for our meet and greets directly to our business associations. 21,000 emails through our LA Bavin program, and in total we had 281 attendees participate in the 9 separate events. As a result, we have brought on 88 new subcontractors, 25 of which are MBE or WBE subcontractors, 12 new nonprofit contractors. Most of those are our partners with Food Rescue. And many of them went back and renegotiated contracts to increase the existing level of subcontracting. And they were able to successfully work with 8 of their vendors with that. And that includes my, unfortunately, not short update. Thank you.
So I have 2 questions before I turn it over to the members. Specifically, what can we do to improve communication between the waste haulers as it relates to the rate system? What can we do to improve that line of communication?
Well, that line of communication, we meet every week, not only with our service providers, go over the details of what has transpired. But what we also have is I have 40 inspectors that I have out in the field right now doing ride-alongs with
40 inspectors?
40 LA San inspectors.
Are you adding more, or is that your
That's my level of staffing. 40 inspectors that are riding along with the teams along with our franchise service providers to truly make sure that the waste assessments, the messaging is getting out there. Some of those we're going to actually send out and follow up with some of the waste assessments that are already been completed to work with customers to ensure that they are being completed correctly.
And the other question I had is, have you identified any other proactive opportunities for businesses to manage their expenses?
We have been, one of the things that we actually have been in discussion with, just started today, is putting more of an online tool that allowed them to work with their service levels and to play with the levels themselves to see if they were to maybe increase the size of their bin but decrease the frequency of it, how that would affect their rates. And we think that tool is going to be very valuable because we're in this for the long run. And a customer can continue and hopefully will continue to decrease their level of service as they are able to embrace recycling more, educate either their workers or their residents, see recycling increase, to see that solid waste service continue to decrease.
Members, are there any questions? Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know that my office has received many dozens of complaints, including 4 today, over the last number of weeks here. And I know that other council offices have received similar, and some council offices have received even more. So I have a number of questions and a few comments. Gentlemen, you heard some of the public testimony before you spoke. And one question that I have about that is, would you attribute some of those complaints that you've heard, just in general, to a lack of right-sizing? Because you mentioned right-sizing the accounts, right? Would you attribute some of that confusion to just those accounts haven't been right-sized in conjunction with this transition?
Yes, in some measure, Council Member. We talked about the level of saturation we have had or have done in being able to bring the Recycla program onto the forefront of any business owner or apartment owner. The fact of the matter is that, you know, businesses, like, they're busy running their daily.
Right. Which is why so few can actually come into a council hearing in the middle of a weekday. There are probably hundreds and hundreds of others who would love to be here but can't.
And so, to the extent that we have been able to saturate not only the general information about Recycla, or even the need and the invitation for this waste assessment, which truly is invaluable, and is, to your point, the difference that it makes. Because if half, as on the example that Dan pointed out over there, if they are able to downsize half of their residual black bin to a blue bin, that's half already.
And I get all that, but as far as some of these, you know, the unintended sort of results, right, are of certain clients not knowing about this transition at all, and all of a sudden they're hearing about this through double, tripling, quadrupling of their fees. Is that because they're just completely outside the realm of knowing about this at all, therefore they don't even know about right sizing? That's kind of where I'm going with this.
Yeah. So I was trying to see, tell you what level of saturation we try to do, and how much more we can and should do, perhaps, is that the notifications that we have sent from the city, are they making it to the right person in a business enterprise? Is the right person, is the right set of eyes reading this sort of advisory thing, educational piece? Then there's all the attempts that the franchisee companies are making themselves in the field, knocking on doors, literally, trying to find the property manager, trying to find the owner. To what extent they've been able to and have been successful in having that engagement. That's crucial. We haven't been successful in every instance. So what has occurred of recent is this last notification that went out, which is, we call it the auto enroll, that until we are able to have this personal engagement where the client, the customer, and the franchisee, this is the service model that's going to kick in as a auto enroll default, if you will. And part of it now is happening where folks now, maybe that did get in the right hands, and they say, well, what could this be about? So it's almost like the first reaction now, because all the previous attempts have not been successful. So that's part of what's going on.
Thank you. Have you all opened a file on all of these complaints? And are you going through them one by one, customer by customer, and actually case managing them?
We have benefit from our sort of our uptick on how we collect, manage, and record data through our customer care center. And so every account is tallied, is followed through, is closed when it's successfully resolved, and we have an accounting of all of that, Council Member.
I want to just kind of go through these, and then I also want to refer to our colleague Mike Bonin's letter. He has 6 specific questions. I also have 6. They're a blend of sorts, but you've seen Mr. Bonin's letter, I hope.
Yes, I was just trying to read it.
And maybe that can be referred to in the file today. But one of the problems we have is the whole swapping accounts thing. We have constituents who have called our office and said they're being double billed now by their existing accounts that are still live and they're still being held responsible for, and the new accounts that are double, triple, quadruple what they were before. So they're looking at a huge, huge headache and a financial burden that they don't really know how to deal with. So it's a very, very serious problem for their businesses. So how do you deal with that lingering sort of non-mitigated issue of two accounts going for a service when they're only getting sometimes no service at all?
Right. And so let me say this, and then Dan. First of all, our highest first top priority has been that no one goes without service on what you just pointed out. Did that occur? Yes, there had been some accounts that we came to call abandoned, where in as much as our objective always was that we had friendly transitions, meaning outgoing companies engaging in a friendly transition with the incoming franchisees. That occurred in most cases, not in every case. But I think the whole handoff, as you would, in a relay race, whether that was more emblematic of the first pre-transition, we acknowledged the fact that for a while there was one company doing the billing and the other company doing the service as a friendly transition, which in the end did achieve our first objective, which was to not have a lapse in service. But it did create and introduce a potential other problem, which was who's sending what, and are they receiving two bills? And that did occur, and if you can elaborate on that.
Right, and yes, we do recognize that did occur in instances. It truly, I mean, we saw 30,000 accounts handed off, and most of those actually went smoothly. It's, we're dealing with billing. If billing doesn't drop off at the right time, but again, with the support of LA San, we've been successful. Every call we get, and it's actually typically it's often from our own service providers, so it's very easy to address. And if they call LA San's Care Center, they're addressed.
I get that it's a very tiny, overall, in the overall scheme of things, it's a very tiny fraction because of the incredibly huge universe of clients that are changing over. It's a small fraction. However, it's still significant in number. So my question again is, do you have those? Do you have case management on the job working with all of those individual customers to reconcile that? Because I think that a lot of the testimony today was, we're not getting anywhere, we're not getting help, we're in the wilderness here.
The answer is yes. I mean, we have I have contract managers and I have a team of staff that when we either get calls from your offices. Or that come into our call center. The call centers know when to escalate certain calls. So if it's just a billing inquiry where they want to know what's happening with the program, the call center can handle it. When it's duplicate or multiple billing, typically escalated up, and we have our contract managers that can work those accounts and address those needs for those customers.
And somewhere else I want to go, and then I don't want to hog the whole floor here, but I might ask you to come back to me, Madam Chair, is that the call center, that's something I want to bring up, because we have had many, many individuals call us and say, well, the call center just said to call the council office. Some of my colleagues have had the same experience. That's unacceptable. So I'm just saying, anecdotally, it's happening.
Yes.
We're getting calls from people who say, we got no answers from the call center, we were referred to you. And that just kind of brings everything in our office to a halt, because what we have to do is we have to call you to figure out how to help the constituent, and that is your job because of the agreement for the franchise waste tax hauling as per the agreement. So just keep that in mind and take it back to the call center to actually do their diligence. I'm sure it's a rare exception, but it is happening.
And we will
That's a problem.
absolutely double check that doesn't happen. Several entry points, whether folks call DWP, whether folks call 311. Is it happening in our own customer care center? We'll triple check that is not, and then we'll touch base with the other folks.
Yeah, we're just not going to have the expertise in the office of the details and, like I said, the case management that is necessary because of this shift. And it really is harming a lot of the businesses out there. There's panic. There's panic out there with our businesses, and you heard some of it, and it's just a fraction of what we're hearing in some of our council districts. So I'll defer to you, Madam Chair, if, I'd like you to come back to me for more questions.
Sure.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Mr. Kokorian?
Have some.
Leo, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Saldivar, we've been talking about some of my concerns about this policy for about almost 6 years now, and a lot of them, I think, have not yet been alleviated, not because of your work, but because of the underlying premise of the notion of exclusivity in part. And I want to talk about that for a second because, in my view, monopolies do not produce cost efficiency, and monopolies do not produce better service. Monopolies take away accountability, and they take away cost competition. And what we're seeing when we hear some of these complaints might be due to some of the right-sizing issues. They might be due to increased cost, as you said in your opening comments, for vehicle purchase and so on. But they might be due to a provider taking advantage of the fact that there's no recourse for a customer. And I don't have a sense yet, and I don't know if you do, I don't know if we're able to assess that yet, how we can determine which of those different causes are resulting in increased spikes in cost. So I don't expect you to be prepared to be able to do that now, but I do think that it's important that as we try to respond on a case-by-case basis to Mr. O'Farrell's point to each of these inquiries about costs, that the council have some feedback as to what are the sources of those increases? How many of them can be alleviated by changing the bin arrangement, for example, or the pickup schedule? And how many of them are just due to the fact that somebody is now able to twist an arm a little bit harder? Because if it's the latter, I think we're all going to have some deep problems with this underlying policy, frankly. So that being said, if and I assume that the rate situation we're going to work through, and we're going to try to, you're going to commit your personnel very aggressively to trying on a customer by customer basis to provide these sorts of options. But in a lot of cases, that won't be possible. For example, many apartment buildings before we adopted this policy had black bin recycling, and the provider had a single bin. Recyclables were sorted at the MRF, and that's how it was done. Now, that apartment building is not going to have the option of putting in a lot of separate bins if they have limited space in a garage someplace for that bin. So, and that's just one example. There's many small businesses that might otherwise have physical constraints in what they do with their bins. So how are we addressing those issues when the customer just doesn't have an option to change their bin arrangement?
Well, Councilman Krikorian, one of the reasons we selected the 7 companies that are now our partners is their commitment to customer service. And we have examples in which some of the companies, and I know that all of them would, customize whatever service arrangement needs to, given the specificity of any one account. I know of examples in which a company has said, look, we will manufacture custom-made bins given your storage and your space limitations so that you still have the value of separating one from the other. Because that is essential for resource recovery and for the custody of either of the two streams, one that's going to the landfill and one that's going for resource recovery. It's essential. But that's the kind of stuff that they're doing, and they offer it to the customer. I think that is a signature of every one of the 7 companies.
Well, that's great to hear, and since they're all represented here, I hope they all hear that that would be the minimum I would expect from those who are granted monopoly franchises. Because when the argument was made that exclusivity was imperative to this policy. The idea was that it would guarantee the provider a stream of income which could then be invested in the physical plant that would be necessary, MRF upgrades and all of those things that would be necessary to increase our recycling rate. That was the argument as to why. So we've given that. Here you go. You have exclusivity. You have a monopoly in your region. You're able now to afford to do that. I don't expect our providers, our franchisees who've been given that opportunity to then double down by increasing rates, by manipulating the bin handling in a way that will oversell their service to their customers. In fact, quite to the contrary, I expect those providers who've been given this monopoly to go the other way and to bend over backwards to ensure that each individual customer's needs are met in exactly the way you've just described. So I hope that every one of our franchisees is committing to that, because I, for one, will be looking at changes in this policy if I don't see that result. Service. We've had these concerns about service. A lot of that is just going to happen on any transition. It's natural. You expect that there's going to be, breaks in the pickup and so on. That growing pains, I get it. I think a lot of that is to be expected. But it raises the question in my mind: what happens in an exclusivity situation when it's a repeated, ongoing problem that doesn't get rectified? Usually in a month or two, a business would say, you're fired, and they would go and get the next company who could provide better service. Now that that's no longer an option, what is a business to do if they have continuing, unresolved service failures?
Well, there's a bit of a flip side to exclusivity, and that is full accountability, because no longer can any one of the companies say, well, that's not my customer. I was not there a month ago. I mean, obviously, that's full transparency, full accountability as to who provides the service to whom. And that's part of the added value of us going through this exclusive franchise system, council member, that our understanding of the industry will be complete and thorough. I told you there were 15,000 accounts that we didn't even know existed, that we now know about, and for sure will know. But with regards to whether any lapse of service and whether a customer has any recourse, like you, we have every faith in the franchisee providers to never let anything escalate beyond that. But, as you would expect us, trust but verify. So we are the arbiter. And whose interest will we always have first? It's the interest of the customer. That's our culture. And that's your expectation of us. So I think I would ask, and I would tell you that should anything escalate to that level, that we are in a very good position to be able to resolve it to the satisfaction of the customer.
What's the club? I mean, what is the enforcement mechanism? Because I know that will be the effort, but maybe because of inadequate capitalization, maybe because of labor problems, maybe because of poor management, for whatever reason, maybe with the best of intentions, a company's just a lousy company, and they don't deliver good service. Then what?
The accountability aspect translates to all the contractual provisions, liquidated damages. We will obviously follow a process by which, if it ends up that this company has to be let go, that happens. But there's very strong provisions in the contract, including liquidated damages, other things. I mean, I will tell you, in the early parts of the pre-transition and very early in the first month of July, where resources were not necessarily matching to the ability to respond. We ourselves, the strength of LA Sound, if you will, if you think we're strong, we were there to help because we knew it was the right thing to do for the interest of the customer. No one should go without service in the middle of summer. So our own forces were brought in to bear, and we did do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corey. And Mr. Cedillo?
How are you?
Councilman?
Yes. I just want to pursue questions that we left off in December or January, the questions I had with respect to small business participation, what those numbers are. I believe we were at 2%. Is that our understanding?
Overall,
Yeah.
yeah, we were in the low, below 5% or so.
Around 2%, I think it was. Do we know the measure, the increased measure, or what we've increased? I see what our results are on the subcontracting successes. So I see new subcontracting opportunities for MBEs, Weebies. So that looks like about 25 contracts at about 500,000. Okay. I see new contracting opportunities for nonprofits. So that I see probably 12 nonprofits got $80,000. And then I see increased value of whoever the existing contractors were, 8 contractors at about 1.2 million. As you aggregate those numbers, what's the percent increase of minority participation, small business participation, and the overall amount of these contracts?
Dan, let me, whether I'm correct or not, we have not tabulated the numbers in the context of the percentage, Councilman, the way that you're asking us the question, unless we have that.
No, we have not tabulated them yet.
We have not retabulated the numbers. That continues to be an organic process, Councilman, to the extent that you will call us back with an actual finite report to you that it will include percentage, even to the extent that you want us to have a full report, which I know you will.
I do.
We just are not fully prepared to give you that right now. But know that this continues to be organic. The companies, it's not an end-all process yet. You always told us, never stop pursuing more engagement. So that continues.
And Mr. Cedillo, if it's any help, we will continue to keep this item in committee. I expect a report back on the issues that were raised by the members, including that of Mr. Cedillo.
Yeah, it's not hard math. I mean, I just
No, it's
looked
very
at the
simple.
periphery of
I'm sure they
it.
can tell you as soon as they get back to the office.
Yeah.
Wait. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to kind of wrap up my first line of questioning, 2 quick things. One complaint we're getting is that customers are receiving bills prior to receiving new bins and prior to receiving service. So that's an issue that could be dealt with case management, I think, case-by-case management. And then a question, do our waste hauling franchisees have the authority to raise fees independently of the city?
Not to raise it.
Right, because that is done that would be an official request as per the agreement that would have to be
It would have
considered.
to be, it would require a modification to the
Justification.
contract.
Okay, modification of the contract. Okay, so.
Right. There's no, the rates, the maximum rates are set contractually.
All right, terrific. Lastly, Madam Chair, in terms of what I know we're going to keep this open and you'll come back and report. One of the things I'd like to explore, I think Mr. Bonin placed in his letter along with his 6 questions, but to closely examine the underlying fee structure and cost options associated with the new program. I think that, in a way, gets to the heart of the matter for these small business operators who feel that they don't have enough options, even as they've been explained. So if that could be explored when you report back to see what recourse they have.
Okay.
Mr. Gokor?
One other thing I'm not sure if this is if it's ripe yet, but one of the arguments that was made in support of this policy was the reduction in truck trips that would come from greater efficiency of routing. And we had a lot of robust debate over whether that would in fact happen. And one of the, I think, underlying assumptions that would give rise to that would be the addition of many more MRFs throughout the city. Because if they still have to drive to my district and Ms. Martinez's district, the amount of miles are not being reduced. The same number of trucks picking up the same amount of trash and going to the same places. Doesn't matter whether you have exclusivity or not. It's the same number of miles to drop that trash off. So the point of all of this was to encourage investment in new facilities around the city, and I'm wondering if that has begun yet. Are there, sorting facilities that are in the works or that will soon be built so that we can count on that environmental benefit that comes from trip reduction?
Councilman Krekorian, and I'm chuckling a little bit because just 3 weeks ago, and I'll be very brief, Madam Chair, we made the best practices trip to New York. And in fact, Chair Martinez was going to come with us, but
I did not go.
You couldn't go. I know, but Jim D'Antona came from her office. So anyway, we're in downtown Manhattan. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and New York. If you've been to New York, how they set out the trash. So there I am looking out because I heard the revving of the engine of the trash trucks. I'm looking out the window of the hotel. 8 different piles of bags, 4 different trucks from different companies, all tying up every conceivable lane, which in New York, there's traffic all the time. And I said, my goodness, 4 different trucks in one block collecting almost at the same time. It only reminded me and refreshed my conviction that this is a better model, environmentally speaking. So, but we can do the theoretical calculation, as you have asked us to do and we've done before, on what is the total miles driven. And inevitably, less trucks on the street on any given block on any given time. You can ask some of our franchisees on how they have been able to optimize already, just with the current routing. And as they learn more, you will see them and expect them to optimize even more.
Okay. I don't want to relitigate that argument because I didn't believe it 6 years ago. I still don't believe it. The only point of that is that if they're still going across town to pick up and then going back to drop it off at the sorting facility, that's not creating efficiency. The only way you create efficiency is if they are housed in different parts of town, if they have sorting facilities in different parts of town. If they're all in our district and going to San Pedro and back or across the valley and back, we're not saving anything until we build more MRFs, until we build more places to house those trucks. So, I mean, that to me is the only way you get efficiency. In the monopoly zone that a franchisee has, they have to have all their trucks there, have their sorting facilities there, and not come back and forth to the North Valley or to Clark's or wherever. So that I don't mean to start the argument again. I just wanted to know what progress has been made in building new facilities.
So the in response to that, the work has begun. Some of that has already taken place. An example: Universal Waste actually moved a yard into their zone to provide service. That just south of them, they're improving 2 facilities to support that, to truly start to minimize that truck traffic. It doesn't do any good to drive your truck 60 miles to get to your zone.
Exactly.
So that is definitely taking place. Some of the infrastructure is brand new and is still in the process right now of going through its design, its permitting to get established. Some facilities are actually coming out of a mothball state because it couldn't support the recycling. Now it can.
Great.
So we are seeing that infrastructure and those improvements to truly begin to centralize some of this operation. And again, it's we're also seeing, new waste streams, organic waste streams we didn't have to handle before, and the infrastructure necessary to support those. So that is taking place.
So, Mr. Kokorian, I certainly appreciate you preaching equity. I could not agree with you more. But with that being said, with the facility certification program, my hope is that we improve some of the facilities in my district, as well as in areas like Wilmington and San Pedro, and even Boyle Heights. That was the reason why I signed on to this effort. The city began this endeavor towards zero waste years ago with an effort to increase recycling and diverting from landfills, which sometimes actually feels like the majority of the trash is coming into my district. So I concur with Mr. Kokorian, but I hope that we get moving on some of these improvements as they're tied to some of these contracts to enclose some of these facilities. I don't have to tell you that. You've been to my district and you know what it looks like. But we have real challenges before us. So I hope this committee can stay focused on making sure we can work through some of these issues. We're going to keep this item in committee for further discussion. I would hope that you would come back to this committee and updates as we move along. So I appreciate you being here. The last thing I want to add on item number 3, I want to make an amendment that the Bureau of Sanitation report back on the feasibility of incorporating into the Recycle LA program an option for neighboring or co-located businesses to share bins to maximize their use, and other options to help businesses achieve cost savings. Okay? Are there any objections to that amendment? Nope. Seeing none, that carries as well. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here. And that adjourns our meeting for today. Have a good afternoon.